Hello family, welcome to Stories with Storytime. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you, as you do.
Samantha Reed, at 24 years old, had everything anyone could dream of. She was the only daughter of Mr. Charles and Mrs. Evelyn Reed, one of the wealthiest families in the region. Her father owned a vast chain of multinational businesses, while her mother was a well-known humanitarian. Samantha had grown up in luxury, surrounded by elegant cars, sprawling estates, and all the finest things money could offer. However, despite all the riches, Samantha felt something was missing. People around Samantha always seemed more interested in her family's fortune than in her as a person. She had friends, but over time she realized they cared more about her lifestyle than who she really was. The men she dated were the same, interested in her wealth and status, but never her heart. Samantha longed to be loved for who she truly was, not for her family's wealth. One evening, after a particularly shallow conversation with a man her father had introduced her to, Samantha knew something had to change. This man, like so many others, was more interested in impressing her with his wealth than learning anything about her. She wanted more. She wanted a life where she could be herself and find love not based on her family's name, but on who she truly was. Samantha decided that she needed to leave her life of privilege behind, at least for a little while. She wanted to experience the world outside her bubble, to live simply and discover if she could find love in a place where no one knew her background. Before she made any drastic decisions, Samantha sat down with her parents to discuss her plan. They were sitting in the large dining room of their estate. "I've been thinking about something for a while," Samantha began, her heart racing. "I want to leave the city for a while. I need time to find myself away from everything here." Her mother, Mrs. Evelyn, immediately frowned. "Leave, Samantha? You're a young woman. The world outside is harsh, especially for a girl like you. You don't need to go anywhere. We can find you a good husband here, someone who will love and care for you." Samantha sighed, knowing her mother wouldn't understand. "But that's the problem, Mom. All the men I meet are only interested in what I have, not in me. I want to live a simple life for a while, away from all this. I want to find someone who loves me for who I am." Mrs. Evelyn shook her head. "It's not safe out there for a girl like you. What if something happens? How will you survive without the comfort and protection of this home? You don't need to struggle when everything you need is right here." Samantha looked at her father, hoping for support. Mr. Charles, a stern but thoughtful man, had been listening quietly. "I won't be gone forever," Samantha said, turning to her father. "I just need some time to figure things out. If I don't find what I'm looking for, if I can't find love on my own, I'll come back. I'll agree to marry the man you want me to marry." Her father raised an eyebrow. "You mean the tech billionaire Marcus who you have adamantly refused to meet?" "Yes," Samantha nodded. "I'll meet him eventually, but first I need to do this. I need to know if I can live a life where people see me for me, not for our name." Mr. Charles leaned back in his chair, considering his daughter's words. He loved Samantha dearly, and as much as he wanted her to marry someone powerful like Marcus, he understood her need for independence. He had seen her frustration over the years trying to find someone who valued her for more than her wealth. Mrs. Evelyn, however, was not convinced. "Charles, tell her. This is a bad idea. She's a girl. She can't just wander off on her own. The world isn't kind to women, especially one who's never known hardship. It's dangerous." But Mr. Charles gave Samantha a small nod of approval. "If this is what you need to do, Samantha, then I'll support you. I don't want you to regret not trying to find your own path." He turned to his wife. "She's strong, Evelyn. We have to trust her." Mrs. Evelyn sighed, still uneasy. "Fine, but promise me you'll be careful, Samantha." "I will, Mom," Samantha said with a smile. "I won't be gone long. I just need time away from all the trouble here." And with that, Samantha's plan was set. She packed a small suitcase with only simple clothes, leaving behind her expensive dresses, jewelry, and the life of luxury she had always known. The next day, with her father's reluctant blessing and her mother's worried gaze, Samantha left the city. She boarded a bus to a faraway place, hoping to start fresh. The city she chose was Rivertown. a small but bustling town known for its vibrant markets and hardworking people. It was a place where no one would recognize her as the wealthy heiress from the capital. Here, Samantha could blend in and live a simple life just like anyone else. When Samantha arrived in Rivertown, she found a small one-room apartment to rent. It was nothing like the mansion she had grown up in, but it was enough for her. The apartment had only a bed, a table, and a window that looked out onto the busy streets below. There were no luxuries, no servants to cater to her every need, but for the first time in her life, Samantha felt free. Now that she was settled, Samantha knew she needed to find a job. She couldn't live off her family's wealth if she truly wanted to experience life as an ordinary person. After walking around the streets of Rivertown for a few days, she came across a small restaurant called Aunt May's Kitchen. The diner had a cozy, inviting atmosphere with the smell of home-cooked meals filling the air. It was always busy with people coming and going, and something about the simplicity of the place drew Samantha in. With her heart racing, Samantha walked inside and asked Aunt May, the owner, if she had any job openings. Aunt May was a kind woman in her mid-50s with a round face and a warm smile. She looked Samantha over, noticing her neat but modest clothes, and asked a few questions. Satisfied with Samantha's answers, Aunt May decided to give her a chance. "We can use another waitress around here," Aunt May said. "But it's tough work. You'll be on your feet all day, serving tables, cleaning up, and dealing with all kinds of customers. Do you think you can handle it?" Samantha smiled, determined to prove herself. "Yes, I can. Handle it? I'll do my best." And so Samantha began her new life as a waitress at Aunt May's Kitchen. The work was much harder than she had ever imagined. She spent long hours on her feet, carrying trays of food, cleaning tables, and taking orders. Her back ached and her hands became rough from the constant cleaning. But despite the exhaustion, Samantha found a sense of purpose in this simple life. For the first time, she was living a life that wasn't handed to her on a silver platter. The customers at Aunt May's Kitchen were regular people, workers, families, and students who came in for affordable meals. They treated Samantha just like any other waitress, and that's exactly what she wanted. She was no longer the rich heiress from a powerful family. She was just Samantha, the new waitress at the diner. As Samantha wiped down a table one evening, she looked out at the busy streets of Rivertown and smiled to herself. She had left behind the world of wealth and privilege, but in doing so, she had found something more valuable: freedom. She wondered what the future held. Would she find the love she had been searching for, or would she eventually return to her old life, marrying the man her father wanted? For now, she was content to wait and see. This was her time to find out who she truly was, and her journey had only just begun. As Samantha continued working at Aunt May's Kitchen, her life in Rivertown began to settle into a routine. The work was still exhausting, but the sense of independence she felt made it worthwhile. However, everything changed one evening when Alex, the kind construction worker she had gotten to know over the past few weeks, asked her out on a date. It had been a long day at the diner, and Samantha was busy cleaning up when Alex, with his usual warm smile, approached her. "Hey, Samantha," he said casually, leaning against the counter. "I was wondering, would you like to have dinner with me sometime? I know a quiet spot by the river." Samantha's heart rose. She had grown fond of Alex's company over the past few weeks. He seemed genuine, down to earth, and different from the men she had known back in her old life. There was no pretense, no showy displays of wealth, just simple, honest conversations. And more importantly, she thought, he didn't know anything about her background. To Alex, she was just Samantha, the waitress. Smiling, she agreed. "I'd love that." Their first few dates were wonderful. Alex took her to quiet, simple places where they could talk, laugh, and enjoy each other's company. He listened to her stories about working at the diner, shared his experiences as a builder, and made her feel special. Samantha felt herself opening up to him, thinking that maybe she had finally found the love she was looking for here in this small town with a man who didn't know she was an heiress. It seemed possible. But as the weeks went by, Samantha began to notice small, troubling signs in her relationship with Alex. It started with him borrowing small amounts of money. "Hey, Samantha, could you lend me a little cash?" I've got an urgent bill to pay and my paycheck got delayed, he said casually one evening. At first, Samantha didn't think much of it. She had saved some money from her work at the diner, and it wasn't a big deal to help him out. But then it happened again and again. Each time, Alex had a reason: a broken tool, an unexpected expense, or a favor he needed to return. The amounts were small at first, but they quickly added up. Samantha found herself dipping into her savings more and more, but she didn't want to think the worst. After all, Alex didn't know she was wealthy. He couldn't possibly be using her for money. However, as time passed, Samantha started noticing other things. Alex often spoke about how she could aim higher in life, hinting that she should be doing more than just working at the diner. "You're smart, Samantha," he said one afternoon as they sat by the river. "Why settle for waiting? You could be doing bigger things." The way he said it made her feel uneasy, as though he knew something about her that he wasn't saying. He seemed to push her toward something greater, as if he expected more from her than she was willing to reveal. Samantha brushed it off at first, thinking he just wanted to motivate her, but the nagging feeling in her chest grew stronger with each passing day. Then came the afternoon that shattered her world. It was a quiet day at the diner, and Samantha had just finished her shift. She was walking out the back when she saw Alex leaning against the wall, talking on his phone. He didn't notice her approach, so she stopped, curious to hear what he was saying. "Yeah, man, it's going well," Alex said, his voice low but confident. "I'm close to getting more out of her. I'm telling you, guy, calm down. You know these rich kids can be spoiled. I followed her here to Rivertown. Imagine, the heiress to the Reed fortune, pretending to be poor. All this act, man," he added with a loud laugh. Samantha froze in place. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Alex knew who she was all along. He had followed her to Rivertown. "Yeah, her dad's the billionaire. I found out where she went after she left the city. She's trying to live a quiet life or something, but I'm working on it. She's already giving me money. It won't be long before I get more out of her." Tears filled Samantha's eyes. Every moment they had shared, every conversation, every smile, it was all a lie. Alex hadn't cared about her as Samantha the waitress. He had only seen her as Samantha Reed, the rich heiress. He had known all along and had used her just like the others. With her heart shattered, Samantha stepped forward, her voice trembling with anger. "So this was your plan all along?" Alex turned sharply, his eyes wide with shock. "Samantha, don't!" She held up a hand to stop him. "I heard everything. You knew who I was and you followed me here just to use me?" Alex opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The guilt on his face was enough for Samantha to know the truth. Without waiting for an explanation, she turned and walked away, her tears flowing freely. She had trusted him and believed that she had found something real, but it had all been a facade. Her breath hitched, and she staggered into the alley behind the diner, leaning heavily against the cold brick wall. A sudden wave of dizziness struck her, her chest tightening, her legs trembling. For a few terrifying seconds, she felt like the ground might give way beneath her. The betrayal didn't just sting, it fractured something inside her. It took several long, shuddering breaths for her to steady herself. Alex had been playing her from the very beginning. That night, Samantha made a decision. She couldn't stay in Rivertown any longer. The town had become tainted by the betrayal she had suffered. She needed to go somewhere even more remote, somewhere where no one would find her and where she could truly start over. She packed her things, her heart heavy with disappointment, and called her parents. Her mother answered first, her voice filled with concern. "Samantha, darling, are you all right? You haven't called in a while." "I'm fine, Mom," Samantha said, trying to keep her voice steady, "but I need more time. I'm leaving Rivertown. I need space." Her mother, sensing something was wrong, began to protest. "Samantha, you're a young woman. We can send someone to." "I'll be fine," Samantha interrupted. "I'll keep in touch, but not as often. Please don't worry about me. I just need to figure things out on my own." Her father, who had been listening quietly in the background, spoke up. "We trust you, Samantha, but remember, you can always come home. You don't have to do this alone." Samantha sighed, her heart aching with both sadness and gratitude. "I know, Dad. I'll be okay." And with that, Samantha ended the call. She was determined to move forward, to find herself once again in a place where no one knew her past. She didn't know where her journey would take her, but one thing was certain: she would never let anyone take advantage of her again. Samantha had left the bustling life of Rivertown behind after Alex's betrayal. She knew she needed a complete change of scenery, something far from the town life she had grown used to. She wanted to find peace away from the people who might recognize her or take advantage of her wealth. With her heart still heavy from disappointment, Samantha decided to move to a rural village. Far from the hustle and bustle of the city, the village she chose was small and quiet, with dusty roads, simple houses, and a slower pace of life. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, where the biggest excitement was market day, and where strangers were noticed. Samantha was sure that no one here would know about her past, her family, or the riches she had left behind. She had become skilled at keeping her identity hidden, and in this village, she could start over once again. After settling into a modest room she rented from an old widow, Samantha decided she needed to find a job. Her savings were running low, and she wanted to earn her way like any ordinary person. As she walked through the village one sunny afternoon, she passed a small supermarket and noticed a handwritten sign in the window: "Salesgirl needed." It seemed like the perfect opportunity. Without hesitation, Samantha walked inside and asked the shopkeeper if the job was still available. The shopkeeper, a middle-aged man with a friendly smile, introduced himself as Mr. Carter. He asked a few simple questions about her experience and background. Samantha, sticking to her story, told him she had finished secondary school and had worked odd jobs in other towns before arriving here. Mr. Carter seemed satisfied with her answers and hired her on the spot. "You can start tomorrow," he said, handing her an apron. "It's nothing too hard, just stocking shelves, helping customers, and keeping the place tidy." Samantha thanked him and left the supermarket feeling relieved. This was exactly what she needed: a simple job in a quiet village, far away from the painful memories of Alex and Rivertown. The next morning, she arrived at the supermarket ready to begin her new role. That's where she met Clara. Clara was the other salesgirl at the supermarket. She was in her early 20s, with bright eyes and a friendly smile. She was quick to welcome Samantha, and they soon became friends. Clara was easy to talk to, and as they worked side by side, they shared stories about their lives. Samantha told Clara that she was an orphan who had only completed secondary school, carefully sticking to her fabricated story. She didn't want anyone here to know who she really was, not after what had happened in the past. Clara, in turn, shared her dreams and hopes with Samantha. "I stay with my uncle and aunt," Clara said one day as they restocked the shelves. "They're nice, but the village is too small for me. I want more from life." "What do you mean?" Samantha asked, curious. "I want to marry a rich man," Clara replied with a determined look in her eyes. "I want to leave this village, move to the big city, and live a better life. I've always dreamed of wearing fancy clothes and living in a nice house. This place is too small for me." Samantha nodded, understanding her friend's ambition. Clara was sweet, but it was clear that she had her sights set on finding a way out of the village. She talked often about meeting a man who would change her life, someone who could offer her the luxury and comfort she longed for. Samantha, on the other hand, was running away from that very life, but she understood why Clara dreamed of escaping poverty. The days at the supermarket passed quietly. Samantha felt a sense of peace working alongside Clara, listening to the village gossip and learning about the customers who came in regularly. It was a simple life, but for Samantha, it was healing. She had almost forgotten what it felt like to be pursued for her wealth, to be seen as nothing more than the heiress to a fortune. But that peace didn't last long. One afternoon, as Samantha was working behind the counter, a man walked into the supermarket. His name was Martin. He was well known in the village for being one of the wealthiest men around. Martin owned the largest house in the village, a grand structure that stood out among the simpler homes. He wasn't fabulously rich by city standards, but in the village, Martin was considered wealthy. He was tall and confident, with an air of authority that immediately caught Samantha's attention. He smiled at her as he approached the counter to pay for his items. "Hello," he said, his voice smooth and pleasant. I haven't seen you around here before. Are you new to the village? Samantha smiled politely. Yes, I am. I've only been here for a few weeks. Well, welcome, Martin said, handing over his money. It's nice to have a fresh face in the village. As he walked out, Samantha thought little of the encounter. Martin seemed polite, but she had learned to be careful with her heart. After what had happened with Alex, she had no interest in getting involved in another relationship, especially not so soon after her last disappointment. However, it soon became clear that Martin was interested in her. Over the next few days, he began stopping by the supermarket more often, always finding a reason to talk to Samantha. He complimented her on her work, asked about her day, and made casual conversation. At first, Samantha brushed it off as friendliness, but as his visits became more frequent, she realized he was pursuing her. Martin wasn't the only one who noticed the growing connection. Clara, who had always dreamed of marrying a rich man, began to grow jealous. She had set her sights on Martin long before Samantha had arrived in the village. In her eyes, Martin was her ticket out of the village, the man who could give her the life she had always dreamed of. But now it seemed that Martin had turned his attention to Samantha instead. One afternoon, after Martin had left the supermarket, Clara turned to Samantha with a forced smile. He likes you, you know. Samantha looked at her, confused. Who? Martin, Clara replied, her voice tight. He's been coming here just to see you. Samantha felt a pang of discomfort. I'm not looking for anything right now, she said softly, trying to reassure Clara. I'm just focusing on my job. Clara's expression softened a little, but there was still a flicker of envy in her eyes. I hope so. I've always had my eye on Martin. He's the only man in this village who can give me the life I want. Samantha didn't say anything more. She could see how much Clara wanted to leave the village, how much she longed for a life of wealth and comfort. But for Samantha, wealth had only brought heartache. The last thing she wanted was to be caught in another situation where someone's interest in her might be more about what she could offer than who she was. As the days passed, Martin continued to show interest in Samantha, but she kept her distance, unsure of whether she could trust him. And though she remained friendly with Clara, the tension between them grew. Samantha could see that Clara's jealousy was simmering just beneath the surface. Once again, Samantha found herself in a situation where her past and her present seemed to collide. She had come to this village to find peace, but it seemed that even here, love and trust were hard to find. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. It was a bright, bustling day, and the local market was alive with activity. Children were playing, running around, and laughing as the villagers went about their day. Samantha had just finished her shift at the supermarket and was walking down the road, her thoughts wandering. She noticed a group of boys playing football nearby, their game spilling onto the street. Before she could react, the ball soared through the air, heading straight for her. Just as she braced herself, a man rushed toward her, intending to push her out of the ball's path, but in his rush, he ended up swaying her right into his arms. For a moment, everything stopped. Samantha found herself pressed against his chest, and when she looked up, her breath caught in her throat. The man who had caught her was tall, dark-skinned, and incredibly well-built. His handsome face was framed with deep concern, but there was a kindness in his eyes that made her heart race. They stood frozen, their eyes locked as though the world around them had disappeared. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice deep and gentle, his arms still around her. Samantha, her heart pounding, nodded slowly. "I think so," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The man smiled, his face softening as he released her. "I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean to catch you like that, but I didn't want you to get hit." Samantha, still slightly dazed from the encounter, smiled back. "Thank you. I didn't see the ball coming." After a brief pause, the man extended his hand. "I'm Nathan, by the way." "Samantha," she replied, shaking his hand, her pulse still racing. As she walked home later that day, Samantha couldn't stop thinking about Nathan. There was something about the way he had swooped in to help her, something about the kindness in his eyes, that made her feel at ease. She didn't know much about him, but something told her she would be seeing him again. And she was right. Over the next few weeks, Samantha and Nathan began crossing paths more often. Whether by coincidence or fate, They quickly fell into a comfortable routine of talking whenever they ran into each other. Nathan told her that he was a construction worker and, like many men in the village, he worked hard to make ends meet. He wasn't wealthy, but that didn't matter to Samantha. He had a warm heart, and in his presence, Samantha felt safe and happy. Before she knew it, Samantha found herself looking forward to every moment she spent with Nathan. They took long walks around the village, talked by the river, and shared stories about their lives. With Nathan, Samantha felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, a spark of happiness, a sense of peace. Alex's betrayal no longer haunted her thoughts. In fact, she barely remembered him at all. Nathan was different, and Samantha cherished every second they spent together. But while Samantha's feelings for Nathan deepened, Martin, the wealthiest man in the village, was growing increasingly jealous. Martin had been pursuing Samantha for weeks, and he believed that he should be the one she chose. With his four-bedroom bungalow, his wealth, and his status in the village, Martin had always assumed that Samantha would come around to seeing him as the best option. But now, with Nathan in the picture, Martin's confidence was shaken. Determined to win Samantha over, Martin decided to enlist the help of Clara, Samantha's friend and colleague at the supermarket. Clara, who had once harbored feelings for Martin herself, had hoped that he might eventually choose her. But seeing his growing obsession with Samantha had left her bitter and envious. One afternoon, Martin pulled Clara aside in a quiet corner of the supermarket. "Clara," he began, lowering his voice, "I need your help with something." Clara looked at him curiously. "What do you need help with?" "It's Samantha," Martin said, frustration creeping into his tone. "She's spending too much time with that construction worker, Nathan. You know I'm the better match for her. She needs to realize that. I need you to convince her." Clara felt a pang of jealousy at Martin's words. She had always hoped that he would choose her, but now he was asking her to help him win over Samantha. Despite her envy, she nodded, forcing a smile. "I'll talk to her." That evening after work, Clara approached Samantha as they were cleaning up the supermarket. "Samantha," Clara began, trying to sound casual, "I've noticed something, and I think it's time we talk about it." Samantha looked up, sensing a serious conversation coming. "What's on your mind?" Clara hesitated for a moment, then continued. "It's Martin. You know he's been interested in you for a while now. He's got everything, a big house, money, and status. Don't you think you should consider him? He's the best option for you." Samantha sighed, feeling a familiar discomfort rise in her chest. "Clara, I don't feel anything for Martin. I'm not interested in him." Clara frowned, clearly frustrated. "But why not? Most of the girls in this village would kill to have a man like Martin interested in them. He's rich, Samantha. You wouldn't have to worry about anything if you were with him." Samantha paused, sensing a deeper question in Clara's words. She had always been careful not to reveal too much about her past, but now it seemed that Clara had picked up on something. "Rich?" Samantha repeated, narrowing her eyes. "What do you mean, Clara?" Clara shrugged, her frustration growing. "You act like you've had money your whole life or something, like you don't care that Martin is wealthy. Most people in this village would jump at the chance to be with him." Samantha's heart raced as she realized Clara had no idea about her past. She was tempted to reveal everything about her life as a wealthy heiress, about why she had left her old life behind. But instead, she chose to keep her secret, at least for now. "I don't care about money, Clara," Samantha said firmly. "I've learned that wealth doesn't bring happiness. What I care about is how I feel when I'm with someone. And when I'm with Nathan, I feel something real." Clara let out a short, mocking laugh. "So you'd rather be with Nathan, a broke construction worker? You could have Martin, who owns the biggest house in the village, and instead you're falling for someone who barely has anything?" Samantha's expression hardened. "Yes, I would rather be with Nathan. He makes me happy, Clara, and I'm not interested in Martin or his money. If the village girls want him, they can have him." Clara's jealousy flared, and though she tried to hide it, Samantha could see the anger in her eyes. Without another word, Clara turned and left, leaving Samantha standing alone in the quiet supermarket. The tension between them had finally boiled over, but Samantha didn't regret her words. She knew how she felt about Nathan. and no amount of money or status could change that. As she walked home that evening, Samantha's thoughts returned to Nathan. She didn't know where their friendship would lead, but for now she was content to let it grow naturally. For the first time in a long time, she felt something genuine, something that had nothing to do with wealth, status, or family expectations, and that was enough. Nathan sat back in the small, cozy hotel room, the best one in the village. It wasn't much by city standards, but it was clean and comfortable, and that was enough for him. The room was dimly lit with simple wooden furniture and a large window overlooking the village. He could hear the faint sounds of people outside, but his mind was far away, lost in thoughts of Samantha. He smiled to himself as he leaned back against the headboard, thinking about her. The way their paths had crossed unexpectedly. The way she had fallen into his arms that day when he tried to shield her from the football. He hadn't expected to meet someone like her when he first arrived in the village. In fact, he hadn't expected much at all when he took on the project. This was supposed to be a short-term escape from the pressure of city life, a way to get away from his parents' endless discussions about his future. But Samantha had changed everything. What Samantha didn't know was that Nathan wasn't just any ordinary construction worker. He was actually Brandon Ellis, a self-made tech billionaire from one of the wealthiest families in the country. His parents, well-known socialites in the city, had raised him in a world of privilege and high expectations. Like Samantha, he had grown up surrounded by wealth, but he had made a name for himself through his own business ventures. Brandon had moved to the United States in his early 20s, where he built his tech company from the ground up. It wasn't long before his innovations in telecommunications technology caught the attention of major corporations, and his success skyrocketed. But along with that success came pressure. His parents, especially his mother, were always trying to push him toward an arranged marriage with someone they deemed suitable. Most recently, they had been pressuring him to meet the daughter of Mr. Reed, the richest man in the city. Brandon had resisted the idea of marrying someone just because their families aligned financially. The thought of an arranged marriage felt suffocating to him, especially since he didn't believe in marrying for convenience or status. He wanted something real. When the contract to install telecommunication devices underground in the village had come up, Brandon had jumped at the chance to escape the city, if only for a little while. His team could have handled the project without him, but he saw it as an opportunity to get away from the noise, from the constant demands of his parents and the expectations that came with his wealth. For a few weeks, he could be just Nathan, a construction worker, and no one would know his real identity. What he hadn't expected was to meet Samantha. The first time he had seen her, he had been struck by her innocence. She didn't carry the usual airs of the high-class women he was used to back in the city. There was no pretense, no vanity, just a genuine warmth and simplicity about her. She had run right into him that day in the village, and from the moment he had held her in his arms, he had known she was different. He had sensed that she didn't see him as anyone special, just another ordinary worker trying to get by in the village, and that was what intrigued him the most. Brandon had quickly decided that he liked being just Nathan around her. He had told his workers to play along with the idea that he was just a regular construction worker. He didn't want Samantha to know about his wealth or his background. He wanted to see if her feelings for him were real, not influenced by his status. In the past, women had been drawn to him for all the wrong reasons: his money, his power, his fame. But Samantha seemed to like him for who he was, or at least for who she thought he was. Brandon laughed quietly to himself as he thought about it. It was ironic, really. He had come to the village to get away from his family's demands and their obsession with wealth, and yet here he was pretending to be someone he wasn't. But for the first time in a long time, he felt free. He didn't have to worry about impressing anyone or living up to his family's name. He could just be Nathan, the man who was slowly falling for a sweet, innocent girl who didn't even know his real name. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and ran his hands through his hair. Samantha, he whispered her name softly to himself, smiling at the thought of her. There was something so refreshing about the way she saw the world. She wasn't jaded or cynical like the women he had met in the city. She wasn't after his money or trying to manipulate him for her own gain. In fact, she seemed completely unaware of his wealth, and that only made him more drawn to her. Brandon's thoughts drifted back to their conversations. Every time they talked, she opened up a little more, revealing bits and pieces of her life. Though he had sensed there were things she wasn't telling him, he wasn't the only one with secrets, and he respected that. Whatever she was hiding, he figured it was probably just as complicated as his own story. Still, he admired her spirit, the way she carried herself with quiet confidence, even though she was clearly used to simpler things. As Brandon sat in his hotel room, staring out the window at the setting sun, he realized something surprising. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about his business, his wealth, or his family's expectations. He wasn't worrying about the latest tech deal or the next big project. All he could think about was Samantha. Her smile, her laughter, the way she looked at him with those wide, innocent eyes. He hadn't felt this way in a long time, and it made him wonder if maybe, just maybe, he had found something real here in this quiet little village. He had no idea how things would play out. Eventually, Samantha would learn the truth about who he really was. But for now, he was content to let things unfold naturally. He wasn't in a hurry, and he didn't want to ruin the connection they had built by revealing too much too soon. As the last light of the day faded from the sky, Brandon smiled to himself. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he was excited to find out. The days in the village seemed to grow warmer and more peaceful for Samantha as her bond with Nathan deepened. They spent more and more time together, sharing long walks by the river, quiet conversations under the shade of trees, and laughter over simple meals. Samantha found herself looking forward to every moment they spent together. Nathan was unlike anyone she had ever known, gentle, humble, and sincere. His presence in her life had brought a sense of joy she hadn't felt in a long time. With Nathan, she felt safe, as though the pain of her past had finally started to heal. Alex's betrayal and the complexities of her old life seemed like distant memories. Every day she spent with Nathan reminded her that love didn't have to be complicated by wealth, status, or power. For the first time in a long time, Samantha felt free. As for Nathan, Brandon, in truth, he had never expected to feel this way about someone so soon after arriving in the village. He had come here to escape the pressures of his family and the constant talk of arranged marriages. But Samantha had taken him by surprise. Her warmth and innocence had captivated him from the moment they met. And as their relationship blossomed, he found himself falling for her more each day. One evening, after a quiet dinner by the river, Nathan and Samantha sat together, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. The air was cool, and the village was beginning to settle down for the night. Samantha looked over at Nathan and smiled, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. "I'm really glad we met," she said softly. Nathan turned to her, his eyes warm with affection. "So am I, Samantha." There was a brief silence between them, the kind of comfortable quiet that only comes when two people truly enjoy each other's presence. Samantha glanced up at Nathan, her heart fluttering as she caught the way he was looking at her. It was a look she had never seen before, a mixture of admiration, care, and something deeper. Without thinking, Samantha leaned in just slightly, and Nathan, feeling the same pull, closed the small distance between them. Their lips met in a soft, gentle kiss, the world around them fading away. For a moment, it was just the two of them, lost in the warmth of that kiss, both feeling the connection between them deepen in a way that words couldn't express. When they finally pulled apart, Samantha blushed, her heart racing. Nathan smiled at her, his hand brushing a strand of hair away from her face. Neither of them said a word, but the kiss had said everything. They were no longer just two friends spending time together. There was something much stronger, much deeper growing between them. As their relationship blossomed, Samantha found herself happier than she had ever been. She had come to the village to escape the complications of her old life, and in Nathan she had found not only love, but also a sense of belonging. But while Samantha's heart was full of joy, there was another person whose feelings had turned bitter and angry. Clara, who had watched from the sidelines as Samantha and Nathan grew closer, couldn't hide her jealousy any longer. She had once dreamed that Martin would choose her, and when he began showing interest in Samantha, Clara had felt betrayed. But now, with Nathan in the picture, her anger had reached its boiling point. One afternoon, as Martin was walking through the village, Clara stopped him. "Martin, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice sharp with frustration. Martin, who had been distracted by thoughts of Samantha, looked at her with a puzzled expression. "What is it, Clara?" Clara took a deep breath, her anger barely contained. "Forget about Samantha. She's not interested in you. She's never going to be. You've been wasting your time chasing after her." Martin frowned, his pride wounded. "What are you talking about? She just needs more time." "No," Clara interrupted, shaking her head. "She's in love with Nathan. Haven't you seen the way they've been together? She's not going to choose you, Martin. You need to stop chasing her and look at what's right in front of you." Martin's face darkened with realization. He had noticed how close Samantha and Nathan had become, but he hadn't wanted to believe it. Now, hearing it from Clara, the truth stung even more. Clara stepped closer, her voice softening. "Why are you wasting your time on someone who doesn't want you, when I'm right here? I've always been here, Martin. I've always cared about you." For a moment, Martin said nothing, his thoughts spinning. He had spent so much time pursuing Samantha, believing that his wealth and status would eventually win her over. But now it seemed that she had chosen someone else, and Clara, who had always been by his side, was offering herself to him. "I don't know," Martin muttered, still processing everything. "I just thought—" "Forget about her," Clara said, her voice laced with desperation. "You deserve someone who appreciates you. Someone like me." Meanwhile, as Clara and Martin had their tense conversation, Samantha and Nathan's relationship continued to grow. But as much as Nathan, Brandon, enjoyed his time with Samantha, he knew that his time in the village couldn't last forever. The project was nearing its end, and soon he would have to return to the city. The thought of leaving Samantha behind weighed heavily on his heart, but he couldn't keep up the charade of being a construction worker forever. One day, as they walked together through the village, Nathan knew it was time to tell Samantha the truth, or at least part of it. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice serious. Samantha looked up at him, sensing that something was on his mind. "What's wrong?" Nathan took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. "I have to leave the village soon. There's a job opportunity in the city, and I can't pass it up." Samantha's heart sank at his words. "Leave? For how long?" "I don't know," Nathan replied honestly. "But it's important. I've been putting it off for a while, but I can't stay here forever." Samantha looked down at the ground, her heart heavy with the thought of him leaving. She had grown so attached to him, and the idea of him leaving the village left a hollow feeling in her chest. "I'm going to miss you," she whispered. Nathan smiled gently, reaching for her hand. "You don't have to miss me." Samantha looked up at him, confused. "What do you mean?" Nathan hesitated for a moment, then spoke softly. "Come with me, Samantha. There's nothing for you here in this village. You could have a better life in the city." Samantha's eyes widened in surprise. "Come with you?" "Yes," Nathan said, his voice filled with sincerity. "You don't have to stay here. We could start something new together in the city." Samantha walked quietly beside Nathan, her mind spinning with the offer he had just made. Leave the village and go with him to the city? The very thought stirred a mix of emotions in her. Part of her longed to be with Nathan. He had brought so much joy and peace into her life. But the city he was speaking of wasn't just any city. It was the same city she had left behind, the same place where her parents lived, and where the life of wealth and privilege that she had abandoned still waited for her. Was she ready to go back? Could she face the world she had run from, even if it was with Nathan by her side? Nathan squeezed her hand gently as they walked. "I know it's a lot to think about, but we could have a good life together, Samantha, a fresh start. I don't want to pressure you, but I care about you, and I don't want to leave you behind." Samantha smiled weakly, her heart torn. "I'll think about it," she whispered. "I just need some time." Nathan nodded, his face soft with understanding. "Take all the time you need. Just know that whatever decision you make, I'll support it." As they walked back toward the village, Samantha's mind wandered back to the memories of her old life, the luxury, the expectations, and the emptiness that had followed her every step. She had come here to escape all that, to find something genuine. And now, with Nathan, she had found love, the kind of love she had been searching for. But was she ready to return to the life she had left behind? While Samantha was deep in thought about her future, Clara had her own struggles to deal with. Her frustration with Samantha and Nathan's blossoming relationship had reached its peak, and she felt desperate. After trying to convince Samantha to choose Martin and realizing that Samantha was never going to change her mind, Clara decided it was time to act. She had spent so much time hoping that Martin would eventually notice her, but it was clear now that he was more interested in pursuing Samantha, no matter how much time had passed. That evening, Clara made up her mind. She would go and visit Martin at his house and see if there was still a chance for her. Maybe, just maybe, she could finally win his attention. She arrived at Martin's house, the largest in the village, with its well-kept yard and four-bedroom bungalow that everyone admired. Knocking on the door, she felt a strange sense of anticipation. Martin opened the door and greeted her with his usual confident smile, but Clara noticed something different in his demeanor. He seemed distracted, tense even. "Martin," he said, stepping aside to let her in. "What brings you here?" Clara hesitated for a moment, unsure how to start. "I wanted to talk to you. About us," she said softly, hoping to find the right words. Martin raised an eyebrow. "Us?" "I've been waiting, Martin," Clara said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Waiting for you to notice me, to realize that I've always been here for you. But it feels like you've been chasing after Samantha this whole time, even though it's clear she's not interested." Martin sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Samantha's different, Clara. She's not like the other girls." Clara felt a wave of anger rise within her. "What do you mean she's different? She's an orphan just like me. We're from the same village. What makes her so special?" Martin hesitated, then muttered under his breath. "She may be an orphan, but she has a certain class about her. She's not like the local girls." Clara's heart sank. "So what? You think you're too good for the rest of us?" Before Martin could answer, a knock came at the door and a young woman entered, looking nervous and upset. Clara recognized her immediately. It was a girl from the village, one of the quiet types who rarely spoke up. Her name was Marlene, and she looked distressed. "Martin, we need to talk," Marlene said, her voice trembling. Clara watched as Martin's face turned pale. "Not now, Marlene," he said, trying to usher her out of the house. "No, we need to talk now," Marlene insisted, her voice growing louder. "You need to take responsibility for what you've done. You can't just pretend it didn't happen." Clara's eyes widened in shock as the pieces fell into place. "What's going on?" she demanded. Martin looked cornered, his confidence crumbling. "It's nothing, just a misunderstanding." But Marlene wasn't backing down. "I'm pregnant, Martin. And you're the father. You promised me we'd figure this out, but now you're trying to deny it?" Clara felt her world shatter. The man she had admired, the man she had wanted so desperately, was nothing but a liar. Not only had Martin been pursuing Samantha, but now he had gotten another girl pregnant and was trying to cover it up. "You're unbelievable," Clara spat, disgusted. "I thought you were different, but you're just another selfish man who only cares about himself." Martin tried to explain, but Clara didn't want to hear any more. She stormed out of the house, her heart filled with disappointment and anger. Martin had never cared about her, and now she saw him for what he truly was, a man who only valued women for what they could do for him, not for who they were. Not that he owed her any explanation. After all, she wasn't the one he liked. But she had loved and admired him all along, and finding out about this was painful. Meanwhile, as Clara dealt with her heartbreak, Samantha had finally made a decision. She had spent days thinking about Nathan's offer to move to the city with him. It was a big step, and she knew that returning to the city meant facing everything she had run away from. But she couldn't deny how much she loved Nathan, and the thought of starting a new life with him excited her. She was ready. But just as she had made up her mind to follow him, everything changed. It happened one afternoon when Samantha had gone to meet Nathan for a walk. They had planned to spend the day together, enjoying the simple pleasures of the village. But when she arrived at their usual meeting spot, she found a group of men standing around a large truck, loading equipment. Confused, Samantha approached one of the workers. "What's going on?" The man looked at her, then nodded toward Nathan, who was standing nearby overseeing the work. "We're packing up the equipment for the project. Almost done here." Samantha's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, packing up?" Before the man could answer, another worker nearby spoke up, glancing at her curiously. "You didn't know? Mr. Ellis is the one running the whole operation. He's the owner of the company." Samantha felt her world tilt. "Mr. Ellis?" she whispered, barely able to form the words. The worker nodded. "Yeah, Brandon Ellis. He's the boss. He's been overseeing the installation here for weeks." Samantha's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to process what she had just heard. Brandon Ellis. The name sounded familiar, almost too familiar. Slowly, the pieces started falling into place. The real reason Nathan had come to the village, the workers who followed his every instruction, the way he had always seemed so comfortable around the construction crew. Suddenly, everything clicked. Nathan wasn't just a construction worker. He was Brandon Ellis, the self-made tech billionaire, and he had been hiding his identity from her all along. Samantha stood frozen, her thoughts racing as Nathan, no, Brandon, walked over to her. He could see the confusion and hurt in her eyes and knew that his secret was out. "Samantha, let me explain," he said softly, reaching out for her hand. Samantha took a step back, her mind spinning. You're Brandon Ellis, a tech billionaire?" Brandon nodded, his face filled with regret. "Yes, I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to treat me any differently. I didn't want you to see me for my money or my status. I wanted you to see me for who I really am, just Nathan." Samantha's heart ached with the realization that the man she had fallen in love with had been lying to her. But at the same time, she understood his reasons. After all, hadn't she been hiding her own secret as well? Tears filled her eyes, but she forced herself to speak. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Brandon stepped closer, his voice sincere. "Because I didn't want to lose you. I didn't want you to see me as some rich guy who's used to getting what he wants. I wanted you to see me, just me." Samantha looked into his eyes and saw the honesty there. He wasn't like Alex. He wasn't trying to manipulate her or use her. He had kept his secret because he wanted something real, just like she had. After a long pause, Samantha nodded. "I forgive you," she whispered, her heart softening. "I understand why you did it. I would have done the same thing." Brandon let out a breath of relief, pulling her into his arms. "Thank you, Samantha. I don't want to lose you." Samantha held him close, feeling the weight of her own secret pressing down on her. She had been so focused on his deception that she had forgotten about her own. She knew that soon she would have to tell him the truth about who she really was. But for now, she decided to wait. "We'll talk about everything when we get to the city," Samantha said softly, her mind made up. They would face the truth together, one step at a time. The news of Nathan's true identity spread through the village like wildfire. It wasn't long before everyone knew that the simple, hard-working construction worker was actually Brandon Ellis, the self-made tech billionaire. The quiet man who had helped install telecommunication devices in the village wasn't just any man. He was one of the wealthiest and most successful people in the country. Clara was stunned when she heard the news. She had always viewed Nathan as just another ordinary villager, someone without much to offer, certainly not someone to be admired. In her mind, he had been beneath Martin, who was the wealthiest man in the village. She had mocked Samantha for choosing him, thinking that Martin, with his large house and status, was the better catch. But now, as she learned the truth, regret washed over her. She sat in her small room, her mind replaying all the times she had looked down on Nathan. She had ignored him, treated him as though he wasn't worth her time. And now, the man she had dismissed as poor and insignificant was the billionaire everyone else dreamed of meeting. Clara's jealousy and frustration boiled over. But more than that, she felt a deep sense of regret. It wasn't just about the money. Clara realized that her obsession with wealth and status had blinded her to what truly mattered. She had been chasing after Martin, thinking that his wealth would bring her happiness. But now she could see that Martin's wealth was nothing compared to the quiet dignity and genuine kindness Nathan had shown. Nathan had been a diamond in disguise, while she had been chasing gold that was only coated, hiding the bitterness and sadness underneath. As Clara sat in her room, reflecting on the events that had unfolded, she realized something important. People were often more than they appeared. The world wasn't just about chasing gold and wealth, it was about finding value in people's hearts, something she had overlooked. Martin, on the other hand, was consumed with jealousy and bitterness. He couldn't believe that Nathan, the man he had viewed as beneath him, had turned out to be a billionaire. It stung his pride, knowing that Samantha had chosen Nathan over him, especially now that he knew who Nathan really was. Martin had spent so much time trying to win Samantha's affection with his money and status, but in the end, it hadn't mattered. As Martin paced around his house, his mind whirling with anger and frustration, he realized that his life, despite his wealth, felt empty. He had been chasing after Samantha, thinking that his money and influence would be enough to win her over. But now he was left with nothing but bitterness as he watched Nathan and Samantha leave the village together. Meanwhile, Samantha and Brandon returned to the city. Their time in the village had brought them closer together, and Samantha felt more certain than ever that she had found someone she could truly love. Despite the whirlwind of emotions that came with discovering Brandon's true identity, she had come to understand that his deception wasn't meant to hurt her. In fact, it had only made her love him more. Like her, Brandon had wanted to be loved for who he truly was, not for his money or status. But the city brought with it a new set of challenges. As they entered the sprawling urban landscape, Brandon's demeanor changed slightly. He was more serious, more thoughtful, and Samantha could tell he was worried about something. She tried not to let it bother her too much, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for them, something she wasn't prepared for. It wasn't long before her fears were confirmed. Brandon had told Samantha that he wanted her to meet his family. He was serious about their relationship and wanted her to be a part of his life. Samantha, although nervous, was excited about the idea. She had never been formally introduced to anyone's family in this way before, and it made her feel hopeful about their future together. But when they arrived at Brandon's family home, things quickly took a turn for the worse. Brandon's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Ellis, were not what Samantha had expected. They were wealthy, well-dressed, and had an air of sophistication that immediately put Samantha on edge. Mrs. Ellis, in particular, seemed to eye Samantha with suspicion from the moment she walked through the door. "Mom, Dad, this is Samantha," Brandon said, his voice filled with pride and affection as he introduced her. Samantha smiled warmly, but her heart sank as she noticed the coldness in their expressions. Ellis didn't even try to hide his disapproval, his lips pressed into a thin line as he looked her up and down. "And where exactly is Samantha from?" Mrs. Ellis asked, her tone sharp and dismissive. Brandon took a deep breath, ready to defend Samantha. But before he could speak, Mr. Ellis cut in. "She's from some village," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "A poor orphan, from what I hear." "Come on, Dad. I can't believe you've been keeping tabs on me. You seem to know everything happening in my life." Samantha's heart stopped. She could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on her, and she fought to keep her composure. How could they look at her like that, as though she were nothing? They didn't know her story, and yet they had already decided she wasn't good enough for their son. Mr. Ellis continued, his voice growing colder with each word. "Brandon, we've talked about this. You need to marry someone suitable, someone who comes from a family like ours. We've already told you that the daughter of Mr. Reed is the perfect match, not this." Samantha's breath caught in her throat. They were talking about her as though she weren't even there, as though she were nothing more than an inconvenience. Her mind raced, her heart breaking with every second that passed. The daughter of Mr. Reed. Did they mean her? Samantha Reed? They didn't even realize that she was the woman they were speaking of, and she couldn't tell them the truth. Brandon stepped forward, his voice firm. "I don't care about Mr. Reed's daughter, and I don't care about family connections. I love Samantha, and that's all that matters." Mrs. Ellis shook her head, clearly displeased. "Brandon, you can't be serious. She's not one of us. You have responsibilities, expectations. Marrying her would be a mistake." Samantha felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had hoped that coming back to the city with Brandon would mean a fresh start, but instead, it felt like she was back in the world she had run from, where money and status meant everything. "I won't marry anyone but Samantha," Brandon said, his voice unshakable. "I've made my choice." Samantha looked at Brandon, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. He was standing by her, even in the face of his family's disapproval. But despite his loyalty, the judgment from his parents cut deep. Brandon turned to Samantha, his eyes filled with concern. "Are you okay?" Samantha forced a smile, trying to be strong. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her heart ached. She wanted to tell him the truth, that she wasn't just some poor orphan from a village, that she was Samantha Reed, the daughter of the man his parents wanted him to marry. But now wasn't the time. The shock of it all was too much. Samantha sat quietly in her friend Rachel's apartment, staring out of the window at the busy city below. It had only been a few days since she had returned from the village with Nathan, and already her life felt like it had been turned upside down. The weight of everything that had happened in the last few days hung heavy on her heart. Her relationship with Nathan had been unexpected, something she had never planned or even imagined. They had met in the most unassuming way, in a quiet village far from the world of wealth and status. But now the truth was coming to light, and it was more complicated than she could have ever anticipated. Nathan was actually Brandon Ellis, the very man her father had wanted her to marry. And she was Samantha Reed, the daughter of the richest man in the city, the very person his parents wanted him to marry, though they had no idea. Yet it was almost too much to process. For years, Samantha had done everything she could to keep her identity private. She had always been uncomfortable with the spotlight that came with her family's wealth, and had gone out of her way to live a life away from the expectations of the elite. Unlike many other wealthy heirs and heiresses, Samantha had never been interested in attending social events or forming connections with other elite families. She had always tried to keep a low profile, even declining interviews or public appearances that could have made her more recognizable. She had built a life of anonymity, one where people didn't associate her name with her father's fortune. But now, her carefully guarded secret was on the brink of being exposed. Sighing deeply, Samantha leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. How had things gotten so complicated? Her relationship with Nathan, Brandon, was real, and her feelings for him were deeper than anything she had ever felt before. Just as Samantha was lost in thought, her phone buzzed on the table beside her. She glanced at it, expecting a message from Rachel, but her heart skipped a beat when she saw the caller ID, Mrs. Ellis. Samantha stared at the phone for a moment, unsure of what to do. She hadn't expected to hear from Brandon's mother after their disastrous first meeting. With a deep breath, she answered the call. "Hello?" she said cautiously. "Samantha." Mrs. Ellis's voice was cold but controlled. "I think we need to have a talk. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? There's a cafe on Fifth Avenue, the Lux Cafe. I'll see you there at 10 a.m. Samantha's stomach twisted with anxiety. She hadn't expected Mrs. Ellis to reach out to her, and judging by the tone of her voice, this wasn't going to be a friendly conversation. But Samantha knew she had no choice. She had to face this head on. "I'll be there," Samantha replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. The next morning, Samantha arrived at Lux Cafe, a high-end spot known for its elegant decor and expensive clientele. As she stepped inside, she felt a familiar sense of discomfort. This was the world she had been born into, but had always felt out of place in. A world of luxury and exclusivity that seemed more focused on appearances than on anything real. Mrs. Ellis was already seated at a corner table, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. Samantha took a deep breath and walked over, her heart pounding as she approached. "Thank you for coming," Mrs. Ellis said coolly, gesturing for Samantha to sit down. Samantha sat, her nerves on edge. She could feel the weight of Mrs. Ellis's gaze on her, measuring her, judging her. "I'll get straight to the point," Mrs. Ellis began, her voice sharp. "You seem like a nice enough girl, but my son has no business being with someone like you. Brandon has responsibilities, expectations. He comes from a family with a certain level of influence, and he needs to marry someone who can match that." Samantha's chest tightened, but she remained silent, listening as Mrs. Ellis continued. I know you come from a small village, Mrs. Ellis said, her tone dismissive, and I'm sure you think you love him, but you're not right for him. You can't give him the kind of life he needs, the kind of future he deserves, so I'm asking you, no, I'm telling you, to walk away, leave my son. Samantha felt a wave of anger and hurt rise within her, but she kept her voice calm. I love him, she said quietly, and he loves me. Mrs. Ellis's eyes narrowed. Love is not enough, my dear, not in our world. Brandon needs someone who can support him, who can match his status. You'll only hold him back. Samantha clenched her fists under the table, fighting to keep her emotions in check. She had expected something like this, but hearing it from Mrs. Ellis's mouth still stung deeply. And if love isn't enough to make you leave, Mrs. Ellis added, her voice dripping with disdain, perhaps this will help. She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table. Samantha stared at the envelope, realizing what was inside. Money? I'm offering you this to go away, Mrs. Ellis said coldly. Take it. Disappear. Find someone else. You don't belong in my son's circle. Samantha's eyes remained fixed on the envelope Mrs. Ellis had slid across the table. She had expected disapproval, but this, being offered money to disappear from Brandon's life, was beyond anything she could have imagined. For a moment, the room around her seemed to blur, and all she could feel was the weight of the insult, the sharp sting of Mrs. Ellis's words cutting into her. Slowly, Samantha lifted her gaze to meet Mrs. Ellis's cold, expectant eyes. I don't want your money, Samantha said firmly, pushing the envelope back across the table. You can't buy me off. Mrs. Ellis's expression hardened and her lips thinned with frustration. Do you honestly think you can give him what he needs? Brandon has a future ahead of him, one that involves a woman of substance, of class. You're nothing but a poor orphan from a village. You have nothing to offer him. Samantha's heart raced, but she refused to let her emotions get the best of her. She had come too far, endured too much, to be broken by someone who knew nothing about her true identity. Samantha remained silent, her hands clenched in her lap. She had never wanted to reveal her identity, never wanted to use her name or her wealth to prove herself. But now, sitting across from Mrs. Ellis, she realized that things had gone too far. She couldn't keep hiding who she was, not if she wanted a future with Brandon. Mrs. Ellis stood up, her patience clearly wearing thin. This is your last chance, she said sharply. Take the money and leave, or you'll regret it. Samantha stood up as well, her heart pounding but her mind made up. I love Brandon, and I'm not going anywhere. He chose me because of who I am, not because of my status or my background. Mrs. Ellis's face twisted in anger. You'll regret this, girl, she spat before turning and walking away, leaving Samantha standing alone at the table. As the door of the cafe closed behind Mrs. Ellis, Samantha felt the weight of the conversation settle heavily on her shoulders. She stood there for a moment longer, gathering her thoughts. Mrs. Ellis's words echoed in her mind, but something else began to rise within her, a sense of resolve. It was time to reveal the truth. She had hidden who she was for so long, but this was no longer just about protecting her anonymity. This was about fighting for the man she loved and for the future they both deserved. With a deep breath, Samantha pulled out her phone and dialed the familiar number of her parents. The phone rang twice before her mother's voice came through, warm and familiar. Samantha, darling, is everything okay? Mrs. Reed asked, her tone concerned. Mom, I need to talk to you, Samantha said, her voice trembling slightly, but filled with determination. I need to set things straight. It's time I tell Brandon the truth about who I am. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Samantha could almost feel her mother's surprise. The truth about who you are. What do you mean, darling? I've fallen in love, Mom, Samantha confessed, her heart pounding as the words spilled out. And the man I've fallen in love with, he's Brandon Ellis. The same Brandon you and Dad wanted me to marry, but he doesn't know I'm Samantha Reed. He thinks I'm just a girl from a village, an orphan. His parents. Samantha's voice caught in her throat. They don't want him to be with me. They think I'm not good enough for him. There was silence on the other end for a moment, and then her mother spoke softly. Samantha, darling, you've always done things your way, and we've always respected that. But if you love this man, if you truly want a life with him, then you need to tell him the truth. He deserves to know who you are, and you deserve to be loved for all of who you are, not just part of it. Samantha's eyes welled with tears, but she smiled softly, her mother's words offering her the reassurance she needed. "You're right, Mom. It's time. I'll talk to your father," Mrs. Reed added gently. "We'll support you, Samantha, no matter what." Samantha nodded, even though her mother couldn't see her. "Thank you, Mom. I'm going to tell him everything. I just hope it's not too late." After ending the call, Samantha felt a sense of clarity wash over her. The truth, long hidden, would soon come to light. And though the thought of revealing her identity to Brandon, of telling him that she was the very woman his parents wanted him to marry, was terrifying, she knew it was the right thing to do. Samantha sat quietly in the back of the sleek black car as it navigated the busy city streets, her heart pounding with anticipation and nerves. The glittering lights of the city reflected off the windows, casting a soft glow inside the car. But all she could think about was what lay ahead. Tonight was the night. She would finally reveal everything, not just to Brandon, but to the world. Brandon had invited her to the charity auction, a high society event that was one of the biggest nights of the year for the city's elite. When he asked her to come, she had felt a rush of both excitement and dread. She loved Brandon deeply, but she had been hiding a part of herself for so long that the weight of her secret had become unbearable. She couldn't keep pretending anymore. For weeks, she had struggled with how to tell him the truth, that she wasn't just some girl from a village, but Samantha Reed, the daughter of the wealthiest man in the city, the woman his parents had been pushing him to meet, the very same person they had wanted him to marry, though neither of them had known it at the time. When Brandon had first invited her to the auction, she had been hesitant. She wasn't one for grand events or mingling with the wealthy elite. But as the days passed and she considered how much longer she could keep hiding the truth, she realized that this event might be the perfect opportunity. Maybe revealing her identity at such a public event would make things easier, less personal. After all, she hadn't been able to find the right words to confess to Brandon, and this way, she wouldn't have to hide any longer. So she called her parents and filled them in. She would use this night, the auction, to reveal who she truly was. Not just to Brandon, but to everyone. It was time for the charade to end. As the car pulled up to the grand venue, Samantha took a deep breath and smoothed down the elegant dress she was wearing. It was a beautiful gown, simple yet classy, chosen by her mother for the occasion. When she had told her parents that she would be revealing her identity tonight, they had been fully supportive. They understood the importance of the moment and had assured her that they would stand by her side when the time came. The driver opened the door, and Samantha stepped out onto the red carpet leading into the ballroom. Her heart was racing as she took in the grand scene before her. The venue was breathtaking, with chandeliers glittering in the night sky and a red carpet lined with photographers and reporters. Elite guests arrived in glamorous gowns and tailored suits, flashing smiles for the cameras as they entered the event. Samantha took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight like this, but tonight she would have no choice. Tonight, everyone would know who she was, and there would be no turning back. As she made her way into the ballroom, the sight of Brandon waiting for her by the entrance made her heart skip a beat. He looked as handsome as ever in his tailored black tuxedo, his smile lighting up his face when he saw her. She felt a momentary pang of guilt, knowing that he still didn't know the full truth about her. But soon, that would all change. Brandon approached her, his eyes filled with affection. "You look stunning," he said, taking her hand and bringing it to his lips. Samantha smiled, though her nerves remained just beneath the surface. "Thank you," she whispered. "You look amazing, too." Together, they made their way through the grand hall, where the city's wealthiest families mingled over champagne and gourmet hors d'oeuvres. The evening was filled with excitement, and the grand auction was set to begin shortly. But all Samantha could think about was the moment that was fast approaching, the moment when she would step into the light and reveal her true identity. The auction began with a flurry of activity. Rare items were brought to the stage, with elite guests bidding astronomical sums for paintings, jewelry, and luxury experiences. The room buzzed with energy, but Samantha's mind was elsewhere. She felt the weight of her secret pressing down on her, and she knew the time was coming. Then, as the auctioneer called for a brief intermission, the host of the event, a famous socialite, stepped forward with a bright smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice ringing through the hall, "we are honored to have some very special guests with us tonight. Please welcome Samantha Reed, daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Reed, who have been key supporters of tonight's event." The applause was polite at first, but as Samantha stood and made her way toward the stage, a ripple of surprise passed through the crowd. Many of the guests had never seen Samantha before. She had always kept a low profile and avoided public appearances. But tonight, she was stepping out of the shadows. As she took her place beside her parents, the shock on Brandon's parents' faces was very obvious. Mrs. Ellis's eyes widened in disbelief, and Mr. Ellis looked utterly stunned. They had spent weeks dismissing Samantha as a poor orphan, someone unworthy of their son. But now, seeing her standing beside the wealthiest family in the room, they realized the truth. Samantha Reed wasn't just some girl from a village. She was the daughter of the richest man in the city, the very woman they had wanted Brandon to marry all along. Mrs. Ellis's hand flew to her mouth, and Mr. Ellis exchanged a look of shock with his wife. Brandon, meanwhile, stood frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief as he watched the scene unfold before him. After the applause died down, Samantha wasted no time. She quickly made her way toward Brandon, her heart racing as she approached him. "Brandon," she said softly, reaching for his hand. Without a word, Brandon led her outside, away from the prying eyes of the guests. They stepped onto a quiet terrace, where the cool night air hit them both, and Samantha felt the weight of the moment settle over her. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," Samantha began, her voice trembling slightly. "I never meant to deceive you. I just didn't know how to tell you the truth. When we met in the village, I was trying to live a simple life. I didn't want anyone to know who I really was, especially not you. I wanted to find love, real love, not based on wealth or status." Brandon stared at her, still processing the truth. "So you're the Samantha Reed, the one my parents have been talking about?" Samantha nodded, her eyes filled with emotion. "Yes, I didn't know who you really were either. Not at first, but once I found out, I didn't know how to tell you. I was afraid you'd think I was hiding it on purpose." Brandon let out a long breath, running a hand through his hair. "This is a lot to take in, but I get it. I really do." Samantha blinked in surprise. "You're not upset?" Brandon smiled, reaching for her hand. "Samantha, I was pretending to be someone else when we met too. I didn't tell you who I really was because I wanted to live a simpler life for a while. I didn't want people to see me as the billionaire tech guy, just like you didn't want to be seen as the heiress." Samantha's heart swelled with relief and love as Brandon pulled her into his arms. "So we're both guilty," she said softly, resting her head against his chest. Brandon chuckled, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I guess so." They stood there for a moment, wrapped in each other's arms, the weight of their secrets finally lifted. They had both hidden parts of themselves out of fear, but now there were no more secrets between them. They were just Samantha and Brandon, two people who had found love in the most unexpected way. "I love you," Samantha whispered, looking up into his eyes. "I love you too," Brandon replied, leaning down to capture her lips in a soft, tender kiss. Inside the ballroom, the mood had shifted. Mr. and Mrs. Ellis, who had been so adamant about keeping Samantha away from their son, now approached her parents with sheepish smiles. "We had no idea," Mrs. Ellis said, her voice filled with regret. "We're so sorry for the way we treated your daughter. We misjudged her completely." Mr. Reed smiled warmly. "No harm done. What matters now is that they found each other, and that is what we intended all along." As the families reconciled, the news of Samantha and Brandon's engagement spread through the room, filling the air with excitement and joy. The elite guests, who had once gossiped about Samantha's humble background, now whispered in awe about the union of two of the city's most powerful families. A few months later, Samantha and Brandon stood hand in hand at their wedding, surrounded by their loved ones. Their journey had been filled with secrets, misunderstandings, and challenges. But through it all, they had found something more valuable than wealth or status. They had found love, the kind of love that saw beyond appearances and into the heart. As they exchanged vows and kissed under the bright sky, they knew that they had learned a lesson that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. Never judge someone based on appearances, because sometimes the most precious treasures are hidden in the most unexpected places. And so, they began their new life together, united by love, trust, and the knowledge that they had found something real.